Good evening, everybody. For those new to my stream, although I like to wait until I see it stop saying sending data, and there we go. All right, how's everybody doing? For those who don't know me, I'm Philosopher Ray. I'm one of the last few real-life philosophers still living in the wild. This is actually kind of a little bit of an impromptu stream. So I actually didn't stream last night. I've been streaming nightly for the first, it hasn't even been a full week since I started doing this. I had been streaming nightly for the first few nights. I took last night off streaming to focus on editing more YouTube video formats of my past couple streams. Um, I what I did do was I actually kind of did it in reverse order. I spent a long time getting my Amazing Digital Circus stream edited, edited down a bit. I mean, it's still, I found my YouTube formatted videos still tend to be like 45 minutes to an hour, but given the streams they're taken from are like 2 hours plus a lot, it's still better format for a YouTube video. I cut out a lot of the bullshit in between and transitions. So, I'm having another one of those nights where I have a little, my throat's a little messy. Basically, but I've got my Powerade bottle here to help me. But basically, so I was able to do that with Amazing Digital Stickers, and I got a YouTube video of the best, most philosophically relevant parts of React. A pretty long form React I ended up doing to an Analyzing Evil Light Yagami video by the Vile Eye. I finally got that put into a properly formatted video for YouTube. I was possibly, given how much editing I did the past couple days, I was possibly considering putting off streaming again, but I thought, this is something I want to be in the habit of doing, and I felt motivated to want to do it tonight in particular, a bit unplanned, because I, on a whim, ended up writing out a whole script earlier today for another a little more polished YouTube video that I'm idea that I have. I mean, a YouTube video that's not just a cleaned up version of a React stream, but an actual scripted video. I've done one of these before. The What is Philosophy YouTube video on my channel. I think it was the very first non-live stream video I uploaded. Is a version of that. And this video, this script that I wrote out, has to do with the philosophy of the mind and philosophical anthropology, which has actually been on my mind since I did the Amazing Digital Circus React. So basically, I wrote out, and I was just kind of on like an artistic whim, but I ended up writing out like a pretty good 5-6 page script for another, pre-scripted video idea. And for those who don't know, that's one of the things I do on my streams. I'm trying to come up with a time-efficient way of cranking out content creation and to have it all set up, especially for when I start teaching in the fall. And this upcoming fall, I'll be teaching a full-time schedule between 2 different academic institutions. And so I want to kind of have a system in place and I want it to kind of start to have become second nature for me. And especially in this time efficient manner where I can just sit down and just spend a couple hours each night in the evening after my teaching day, either streaming for a couple hours or editing through CapCut more YouTube videos, right? So to try to be time efficient, the ideas I've had have been to kind of do these streams to get raw footage and then use CapCut to make YouTube videos out of them, which is a common format. But as a part of that format, that means there are some scripts for, a little more polished, proper YouTube video formatted kind of ideas that, that I want to read out and get the audio recorded for so that I can have a little more neater, like shorter form, not just like a lengthy live stream or React kind of video, but a neater, shorter form style of of, you know, a YouTube video, kind of like, again, I would point you to, if you haven't seen it, the What is Philosophy video I uploaded. I did exactly this. And so as a part of trying to be time efficient, what I did with that video, and something that I want to kind of try to make regular in my live streams to try to get the audio down nice and easily for later editing, is I just simply read out the script on the live stream. And this allows me, you know, and then since it's live, raw, kind of rough live footage, I can, you know, mess up, I can do multiple takes, I can pause in between, you know, paragraphs, I can clear my throat, which I kind of do compulsively anytime I know I'm recording something important. I like overthink it, um, kind of like I'm doing now. And so that's how I did that What is a Philosophy video. One of my first streams, I just like, I wrote the script for it earlier in the day, and then one of my first streams, I just simply read out, you know, the script. It was rough read with multiple takes and mess ups and a bunch of pausing and clearing my throat in between. But then I cleaned it. I was able to clean it up very nicely in CapCut, and I think it came out to be quite polished. And I was impressed with that. So I thought, you know, I should keep doing this. I should keep, anytime I have the whim to, type out a script for a little more proper, polished kind of YouTube video idea. And then, um, and then what I can do is just do what I did last time and just go back in CapCut and polish it up. Even more polished than my video edits of React streams, because those are longer form. These videos, since they're a little shorter, I can actually take the time to sit there and like really go in and clean up every little pause and and like, you know, little mess up. So if I didn't do anything else with this sort of impromptu stream tonight, I wanted to at least read through that script, get the audio and animation recorded on me reading it against my normal little Japanese campus background here. And then maybe, depending how long that takes, because it is like a 5-6 page video. So depending how long that takes, I then, you know, may do a little React. I didn't have a whole lot of stuff to react to. I thought one thing we could maybe discuss a little, since it's also relevant to Digital Amazing Circus, is Neurosama, the first AI VTuber. I thought is interesting, and there's some philosophical implications to discuss. But basically, yeah, so that's kind of my idea. I think before any more time goes by, I just want to go ahead and do a read through of this script. Kind of like when I read through the What is Philosophy video script on one of my live streams. I'm gonna mess up. I'm gonna like do multiple takes of certain lines. I'm gonna like pause in between certain lines. I'm even might be like clearing my throat and stuff repeatedly throughout. That's just kind of my process for how I get a script read off neatly and properly. And then, you know, I'm gonna go back through with CapCut, so I can make all the mistakes in the world and just cut them out later. So that's just kind of the vibe of how this is gonna work. But I'm just gonna go ahead and read off that script now. Just give me 1 second to kind of bring it up. Okay. So this video is called Philosopher Explains the Philosophy of the Mind, or like Philosophy of the Mind 101, or even Philosophical Anthropology 101. All right? I'm going to read through it now. And forgive, for anybody listening to this live footage, forgive all the, you know, mistakes and pauses and throat clearing and all the crap I'm going to do getting through this script. It's like 6 pages long, 5, well, yeah, no, it's 5 pages long. My What is Philosophy video, the script for that was 4 pages long, and that with edits turned into a 16-minute video, so I'm guessing this will be closer to 20. But it may take me longer to actually read it out. All right. Have a little more Powerade. Clear my throat one more time. Sorry for the gross sounds. Actually, you know what? I can like mute my microphone to do that. Hold up, let me do that real quick. it occurred to me, I think streamers do that all the time. They'll mute their mic to do stuff like that. It occurred to me I should probably get in the habit of doing that. Okay. Here we go. Following my recent React stream to clips of the amazing digital... Well, I fucked up already. Following my recent React stream to clips of the amazing digital circus and some of the philosophical implications of the last episode's reveal, I ended up discussing interesting aspects of the philosophy of the mind and philosophical anthropology. Philosophical anthropology is the philosophy of the human being. That is, the question of what makes a human person. In the same... Oh, God. I messed up there. Philosophical anthropology is the philosophy of the human being. That is, the question of what makes a human person. In the time since my TADC stream, I've had the thought that it might be helpful to make a more YouTube-friendly video format providing an introductory explanation to the basics of philosophical anthropology and the philosophy of the mind. In particular, I thought it might be helpful to discuss the common dualism versus materialism dichotomy questions of the mind and the human person are often centered around contemporarily. Why this can be... God damn it. In particular, I thought it might be helpful to discuss the common dualism versus materialism dichotomy that questions of the mind and the human person are often centered around contemporarily. Why this can really be thought of as more of a false dichotomy, and, as discussed in my TADC stream, how a more classically Aristotelian view known as hylomorphism can be thought of as a helpful third position, freeing oneself from the false binary of dualism and materialism, and providing an account for the human person, which is both substantially unified, or, in other words, not dual. Maybe I should just take this from the top. I don't know, I'm starting to get frustrated. And providing an account for the human person, which is both substantially unified, or in other words, not dualist, yet simultaneously goes beyond and avoids the many issues of a purely materialistic account of the mind and person. So, first things first. What do I mean when I use phrases like dualism and materialism? And how do these two views form a false dichotomy with one another in contemporary discourse? Dualism refers to the view that the human person can be thought of as a composition of two wholly separate substances, that is, two separate things bound to one another through some kind of a system of causal interaction, the body and the mind or soul. Traditionally, a dualist would understand the self as being a purely abstract Traditionally, a dualist would understand the self as being a purely abstract and immaterial intellect, a mind which exists separate from the body. The body, in this sense, is an object entirely distinct from the mind, which the mind or soul acts upon and pilots as some sort of a meat puppet or organic machine. Almost as if the body were some kind of a biological video game avatar, and the mind the player of the game, piloting the avatar around through a video game controller. Let me try that last line again. Almost as if the body were some kind of a biological video game avatar, and the mind the player of the game, piloting the avatar around through a video game controller. In ancient Greek philosophy, dualism is often associated with Plato and Socrates, who conceived of the soul as not only separate from the body, but even, in many ways, almost hindered and obstructed by the physicality of the body, which imprisoned the rational soul of the human being within a world of constant physical change in particularity, unable to fully access the intelligible realm of universal, immutable, immaterial form, which Plato regarded as the most fundamental basis of reality. Socrates represents this dualist view rather well in the form of a common troll he liked to play on the people of Athens. It is said that in wintertime, Socrates would deliberately walk around Athens lightly dressed for the cold weather, literally for no other reason than to provoke people into inevitably asking him, "Hey, Socrates, aren't you cold?" This was all so that Socrates could then have an excuse to fire off the witty response he already had loaded in the chamber for just this occasion, wherein he'd say in response, "What? Who? Me? Oh no, I'm not cold. My body is cold, but I'm not cold." This language represents the underlying metaphysical assumption to dualism quite well. Notice how Notice how there is a clear and complete distinction made between the subject of I and the object of my body. All that falls under the all that falls under the conceptual definition of the subjective pronoun of I, me, myself, is entirely separate in its being from the object that is my body. The body may be my body in the sense that it belongs to me, like an object that I own, and thus has some kind of a unique and personal connection to myself. However, the nature of who and what I am remains nonetheless a purely immaterial mind and soul wholly separate from my body. Thus, the term dualism encapsulates the nature of the Thus, the term dualism encapsulates the nature of the metaphysical relationship underlying any individual human being as two separate things, a soul and a body, forming a causal relationship between one another. Dualism is a philosophical view with a long history behind it, dating all the way back to ancient Greek thinkers like Plato and Socrates, and often making a prominent appearance in the philosophical traditions of other cultures, such as Buddhist philosophy in the East. However, in the modern world, dualism is most commonly associated with the significant influence of French philosopher René Descartes, who, in his Meditations on First Philosophy, famously defined the mind as a thinking yet non-extended substance. Non-extended here means immaterial. And the body, by contrast, Descartes defined as an extended, or in other words, material, yet non-thinking substance. Descartes goes on to define the self as existing entirely as immaterial thought, while relegating the body to the same category as non-rational animals, mere automata, effectively just organic machines operating without thought. Oh crap, I got something caught in my throat. Sorry for anybody listening live. I was like trying so hard not to mess up that I somehow got something caught in my throat. Oh god, I hope it doesn't prevent me from getting through this. I think it's like a hair from my beard, as gross as that sounds. Give me one sec. Okay, sorry about that. I'm gonna just in case, try that last line on that last paragraph one more time. Descartes goes on to define the self as existing entirely as immaterial thought, while relegating the body to the same category as non-rational animals, mere automata, effectively just organic machines operating without thought. Given just how widely known Descartes' name is, along with one of his most famous phrases, "I think, therefore I am," throughout popular culture to this day, it should come as no surprise that Descartes remains, for better or for worse, one of the single most impactful and influential thinkers on modern philosophy, who profoundly many. Oh, God damn it. Given just how widely known Descartes' name is, along with one of his most famous phrases, "I think, therefore I am," throughout popular culture to this day, it should come as no surprise that Descartes remains, for better or for worse, one of the single most impactful and influential thinkers on modern philosophy. One who profoundly shaped many of the dominant philosophical assumptions of the modern Western world. Likewise, the legacy of Descartes' strictly dualist account of the human person remains Likewise, the legacy of Descartes' strictly dualist account of the human person remains itself one of the most widely held assumptions throughout modern society about what something like a soul even is, by definition. Most people, when hearing the word soul, naturally assume a Cartesian dualist understanding of the soul as some immaterial, separate, and even foreign substance to the body. This is precisely what often contributes to growing feelings of skepticism many people have towards the existence of a soul altogether, as, given what modern science has come to teach us about things like neurology and the human brain, in a secular, scientific, and materialistic modern world, many, while assuming a Cartesian dualist understanding of the soul, tend to find the existence of such a ghost in the machine, so to speak, as dubious at best, effectively akin to an unnecessary add-on to the human body, no longer needed to account for the complexities of human thought and behavior in light of what we know about the human brain. This, of course, naturally segues into the other end of the false dichotomy, often assumed in modern understandings of philosophical anthropology and the philosophy of the mind, that being materialism. Materialism, more broadly speaking, refers to the metaphysical view that existence is entirely reducible to physical extension. In other words, the entirety of a substance's being is confined to its physical extension in space and time. There is no immaterial layer of existence under a materialistic worldview. To a materialist, physical extension and being are one and the same. To call something immaterial without physical extension is literally to render it non-existent to the materialistic worldview. As applied to the philosophy of the mind, this would be the view that the mind and the physical brain As applied to the philosophy of the mind, this would be the view that the mind and the physical brain are one and the same. The entirety of a person's personality, thoughts, emotions, etc. are themselves entirely reducible to physical processes in the brain, how their brain is structured, how and which of their neurons are firing, etc. Thus, a material Thus, a materialist would reject the existence of a soul, or even a mind, at least in the immaterial sense of the term, in favor of the view that the entirety of what a person is not two things, but rather one thing: their physical body, which their brain is simply a part of. Friedrich Nietzsche, in the chapter Despisers of the Body, from his famous work Thus Spoke Zarathustra, articulates this description when he states Friedrich Nietzsche, in the chapter Despisers of the Body, from his famous work damn it. Friedrich Nietzsche, in the chapter titled Despisers of the Body, from his most Friedrich Nietzsche, in the chapter titled Despisers of the Body, from his most famous work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, articulates this description when he states that, quote, body am I entirely and nothing more, and soul is only the name of something in the body. This effectively summarizes the standard materialistic account of the mind and human person. One's existence is contained entirely in one's physical body and brain and nothing more. And as Nietzsche states, the notion of anything like a soul is really just another way of conceptualizing properties of the body. For example, someone might use the word soul to refer to the collection of personality traits and features of their consciousness in an abstract sense, despite the fact that, to the materialist, such things are only ever accounted for as physical properties of their brain and nervous system. And thus, it is from the confluence of these And thus, it is from the confluence of these two conflicting trends of modernity, the influence of Cartesianism on shaping a distinctly dualist assumption about what the soul is, along with the materialistic and anti-metaphysical assumptions of scientism, that modern understandings of and discussions about philosophical anthropology and the philosophy of the mind commonly reduce to a false dichotomy between Cartesian dualism and materialism. In other words, the average person in modern society often assumes the question of philosophical anthropology In other words, the average person in modern society often assumes the question of philosophical anthropology to be a binary choice between either a strong dualistic view of human beings as immaterial minds and souls interacting with the world through a physical body which they pilot as organic machines separate from themselves, or a strictly materialistic view of human beings as nothing more than physical bodies causally or a strictly materialistic view of human beings as nothing more than physical bodies causally shaped by external factors in a deterministic fashion with no soul or immaterial layer of existence whatsoever, and any notion of the mind or intellect as nothing more than the physical brain. Yeah, this is a long script. However, such modern assumptions about philosophical anthropology and the philosophy of the mind are, in fact, based upon nothing more than a false binary grounded in common philosophical misunderstandings, themselves the inevitable consequence of the many failures of modern educational systems. While many thinkers prior to Descartes were some form of dualist, such as the aforementioned Plato and Socrates, neither dualism nor materialism constitute one of the most significant and influential accounts of the human person dominant in the classical tradition, that being more of a properly Aristotelian hylomorphic view, which, in fact, serves as an effective third position and alternative to both dualism and materialism, enjoying some of the strengths of both views without many of their weaknesses. All right, 2/3 of the way there. First, in order to understand the hylomorphic account of the human person as Aristotle outlines it in De Anima, one first needs to understand the basics of Aristotle's physics and metaphysics. While understanding Aristotelianism would ultimately require a whole video in its own right, if not even a playlist of multiple videos, to briefly summarize, hylomorphism. Let me just start this paragraph over. First, in order to understand the hylomorphic account of the human person as Aristotle outlines it in De Anima, one first needs to understand the basics of Aristotle's physics and metaphysics. While understanding Aristotelianism would ultimately require a whole video in its own right, if not even a playlist of multiple videos, To briefly summarize, hylomorphism is a term derived from the Greek words hule and morphe. Hule in Greek literally means wood, though is excuse me. Hule in Greek literally means wood, though is also commonly used to mean something like raw material or stuff. Thus, in this context, hule effectively means matter. Morphe in Greek literally means shape, though in this context effectively means form. Thus, hylomorphism literally means something to the effect Thus, hylomorphism literally means something to the effect of matter-formism. Under such a hylomorphic account of existence, a substance exists, by its very nature, at the intersection of both matter and form. Matter, in the Aristotelian sense, is not to be confused with the modern materialistic definition of matter as mere physical extension. Rather, when Aristotle uses the term matter, he is referring to the potential being of Rather, when Aristotle uses the term matter, he is referring to the potential being of a substance, that is, the raw stuff out of which something is made. Form, by contrast, is the actuality of a substance, the specific shape and definition of what something is made into. In De Anima, Aristotle provides the helpful example. In De Anima, Aristotle provides the helpful example of a wax and seal. Consider how letters used to be sealed back in the day. Someone would pour a small amount of hot wax onto the back of the envelope and then press the shape of a seal into it, so that it will cool into a seal bearing a specific shape or marking. If we treat the seal on the envelope as a substance, then the raw hot wax, by itself entirely amorphous and without shape or definition, would be its material, the stuff from which it was made, with the potential to be shaped into something actual or defined. By contrast, the shape and design of the seal pressed into the wax would be its form, the specific shape and definition in forming the wax into a definable seal, the actuality of what the wax is made into. This serves as an analogy for all substantial being, wherein everything is always comprised of raw material potential from which it is made, and the definition of the form and This serves as an analogy for all substantial being, wherein everything is always comprised of raw material potential from which it is made, and the definition of the form, shape, and actuality of what it is made into. Importantly, all substance, while existing of both material and form, nonetheless... Oh, fuck. Hold on. Importantly... you know what? Importantly, all substance, while existing of both material and form, exists nonetheless as one wholly unified substance. The matter and form comprising a substance are not two separate substances or two separate things in of themselves. Rather, they are the two aspects of the one thing made from and into what that thing is, one substance. Matter and form, therefore, are entirely inseparable from one another. Matter cannot exist without a form and actual existence to what it is, with the concept of pure material. Matter cannot exist without a form and actuality to what it is, with the concept of pure material, or prima materia as it's known in Latin, literally being only ever possibly existent and entirely unintelligible for that very reason. Aristotle would maintain that there is such a thing as pure form, or pure actuality, and that this would, in fact, quite literally be God, pure actuality without privation or change. But outside of God, nothing can exist without the material form which it is made. But outside of God, nothing can exist without the material from which it is made, any more than it can exist without the form it is made into. Again, matter and form are inseparable from one another as one unified substance in this hylomorphic manner. With some of the with some of the basics of Aristotelian metaphysics now under our belts, let us return to the issue of philosophical anthropology. According to Aristotle, any living According to Aristotle, any living being exists in exactly the same way as any other substance, at the intersection of both matter and form together as one inseparable substance. This is what then leads to a considerably different account of what a soul is in the Aristotelian sense of the term. This is what then leads to a considerably different account of what a soul is in the Aristotelian sense of the term, as contrasted with the Cartesian dualist assumption many people are used to in modernity. In De Anima, Aristotle defines the soul as simply the actuality of a living being. In other words, the soul is simply the form of a living thing. The body, by contrast, is the organic material of a living thing, which by itself provides the raw organic material with the potential for being alive. Yet it is the soul which actualizes a living organism into actually being alive. Just as any substance is an inseparable union of matter and form, so too a living thing is an inseparable union of body, as is its organic material. Just as any substance is an inseparable union of matter and form, so too a living thing is an inseparable union of body, as it... Damn it! Just as any substance is an inseparable union of matter and form, so too a living thing is an inseparable union of body, as its organic material, and soul, as its actuality. This is what renders hylomorphism such an effective alternative. This is what renders hylomorphism such an effective alternative third position to the false dichotomy of dualism and materialism. To be clear, the hylomorphic view is not a dualist view. The human person, as with any living thing, exists as one substance. Whereas a dualist would treat the body and soul as two separate substances, two separate things interacting with one another in this Whereas a dualist would treat the body and soul as two separate substances, two separate things interacting with one another in some manner, the hylomorphist understands that body, mind, and soul all exist as one unified thing. The dualist would maintain that you are entirely your soul, as distinct from your body, which is something else entirely from you, a mere avatar and organic machine through which you, that is your soul, interact with the world. However, the hylomorphist understands that while it is true that you are your soul, it is equally true that you are your body as well. Your body is as inseparably a part of you as is your soul and mind, rather than something distinct from you altogether. Yet, at the same time that the hylomorphic Yet, at the same time that the hylomorphic view rejects such a substance dualist account of the relationship between body and soul, it simultaneously rejects the strict materialistic impulse to eliminate the soul from the anthropological equation altogether and reduce everything to the body. The materialist agrees with the hylomorphist that you are your body, but then goes so far as to say that you are your body and nothing more, much like the previously mentioned Nietzsche quote. While the hylomorphist does not treat the soul as a separate substance from the body with its own bodily independent existence, the hylomorphist does, nonetheless, maintain that the soul exists as much a part of who and what you are as does the material body, insofar as the soul is the actual state of what the organic material of your body is made into as a living person. Thus, in conclusion, the human person, under the hylomorphic view, exists as one unified substance between both body and soul as they exist inseparably from one another, thus affording us a third alternative from the false dichotomy between dualism and materialism that tends to shape many of the modern assumptions about the philosophy of the mind and philosophical anthropology. The dualist says, The dualist says, I am my soul and nothing more, and my body is something separate from me entirely. The materialist says, I am my body. The materialist says, I am my body and nothing more, and there does not exist an immaterial soul for me to have. However, only the hylomorphist enjoys the ability to say that I am both my body. However, only the hylomorphist enjoys the ability to say that I am both my body and my soul together, all at once, as one substantial being that is my person. And that is why I favor a more Aristotelian hylomorphic account of philosophical anthropology, as distinct from both dualism and materialism, a historically influential view that has unfortunately become less well known in the modern era, despite its strength in addressing many of the problems arising out of both dualism and materialism. End script. Oh, I felt like that took a lot of takes, kind of frustratingly. So sorry to anybody watching that back after the fact. It's 1:30. Okay. We can maybe try to do a little react. I was trying to think of things to react to that were relevant to things like dualism. There was a clip for, if anyone's ever seen that anime, 100 Girlfriends That Really, 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 Really Love You. It's a crazy ass anime, by the way, for anyone who hasn't seen it. But basically, I wanted to look for the clip to react to, but I couldn't find the clip to react to. But essentially, there's a scene in that show at one point when everybody ends up body swapping, and basically their souls become extracted from their bodies, and then these souls end up like mixed around and ending up in the wrong body. It's basically the kind of idea of like Freaky Friday, maybe. Actually, maybe we could react to Freaky Friday. No, I'm gonna just do some commentary at the end here. I don't think I'm gonna do a react tonight. I probably shouldn't be on here much more than another 20-30 minutes anyway. I'll just do some commentary. I'll just talk. But basically, what was I gonna say? So it's like a freaky. What I'm trying to say is we see this in media a lot. There's a very what I was kind of getting at in my script. There's a very assumed Cartesian dualism, that goes into conceptions of not only the soul, but even a lot of the kind of default assumptions a lot of people have about how personhood works, how mind-body relation works, and you see this all over the media in various forms, such as Freaky Friday or various countless many parodies of it, like in that anime where all these girls like body swap with each other. That is classic Cartesian dualism. That is assuming that all that you are as a person is something wholly distinct from your body, such that you can literally just take two people's souls and just swap them and put them into each other's bodies, and they would still be the same people, just in a different body. That's the dualist assumption. You see it in media all the time. You especially see it in cartoons a lot. People, this goes on in cartoons all the time. And we're like, let's say you get a character in a cartoon who's like, there's a curse put on them and they're turned into an animal or something, or they body swap, or they're, there's, or even they just become disembodied, or they're a ghost, or somebody, a cartoon character dies and then this little ghost floats up of them. That's all classic dualism. Well, I say classic, it's like Cartesian. That's a very modern, actually, conception. That's what I said. Like, hylomorphism is the Aristotelian view. It was very deeply influential throughout antiquity and heavily influential in the scholastic period. A lot of medieval scholastics, like Aquinas, were hylomorphists. Well, okay, actually, that's an interesting debate, and I could rant about that one for a while. Maybe I'll spare getting into the rant now. But basically, Aquinas, he likes to say he's a hylomorphist, and he's an Aristotelian. But the issue is Aquinas, he makes a lot of concessions in order to reconcile. He's very interested in reconciling Aristotelianism with Christian theology. And while he wants to hold to this ostensibly Aristotelian hylomorphic view of, of like body and soul, and he wants to be able to say, saying, no, a human person is one substance. He makes these concessions in order to reconcile, this kind of view with Christian theology, to the point that he almost, it arguably turns his view into a kind of just a slightly weaker version of dualism, where, I mean, he's effectively treating the soul, the intellect, and the intellectual soul as effectively its own substance. He'll even use the phrase intellectual substance sometimes to refer to it, and will, in any regards, for obvious theological reasons, the intellectual soul has to be able to survive bodily death and exist outside of the body and away from the body, which that would not be Aristotle's view. Like, just to clarify, I was trying to hammer this point in my script, but in Aristotle's view, like, you die with your body, because everything that is you is your body and soul, your material and form, material being your body, form being your soul. It's those two things together. That's what makes you, is being the form of human being as instantiated in this material incarnation, right? An intellectual soul, which is a human soul in the Aristotelian sense, an intellectual soul as inhered or as instantiated in this particular hunk of organic material that is your body. And so the moment your body dies, there is no more you, because you are only you insofar as you're a human being, insofar as you're an intellect, an intellectual soul, as inhered in this physical body. And so you die with your body. And Aristotle, I mean, to be fair, it's kind of controversial. There is some scholarly debate over what Aristotle's view on that would be. Aquinas likes to seize on this super controversial quote out of De Anima, about, Aristotle makes this kind of almost offhanded comment about, well, maybe, the soul, the actuality of your form sort of becomes one, with form, and one, there's a oneness, that's achieved in death or something. But he's almost surely probably speaking metaphor. Anyway, it's a very controversial line. I won't get into it. But Aquinas tries to seize on that and say, therefore, there's such a thing as the soul surviving bodily death. It seems like a stretch. I mean, under the Aristotelian view. But the point is, Aquinas has to be able to say, for Christian theological reasons, no, the soul can survive bodily death. And in fact, not only does it survive bodily death, it survives with your individuality intact. And in the Aristotelian view, Individuation is done through material. It's the material that individuates. The form is universalizable, right? Form is like a species, it's a kind. Material is what makes this particular instantiation of that kind of thing. So there's the universal category of microphones, like there's all microphones, and then there's even like the form and the shape and the actuality of a microphone. And then there's this microphone on my desk right here. And what makes this microphone on my desk, this microphone on my desk, and not just like, and not some other microphone on someone else's desk, or even like the idea or the abstracted like actuality or form of microphoneness. What makes it this microphone on my desk is its material. It's the form and shape of a microphone as adhered in this lump of material in front of me. And that's what makes it a this microphone here, right? So individuation and particularity is done through material. And so for Aquinas to say it's not even just that the soul survives bodily death, but it survives as your soul, individuated to you, and you retain your individuality and even like your particularity of your personality and content. I mean, that like that's impossible under an Aristotelian view. If we're being hylomorphous, that's like literally impossible. At that point, Aquinas is effectively just being a dualist. And he's treating the intellectual soul as the way he calls it sometimes, by the way, an intellectual substance, which is how he refers to angels. He refers to angels as intellectual substance all the time, and he refers to at times it's interesting, he backs off this language at a certain point. And I don't know if that's like a backpedal or what, but he does kind of back off the language at certain points. But other times he'll even refer to the human soul as an intellectual substance. And intellect is immaterial in the Thomistic view. So it's literally saying an immaterial substance, and he's treating the human soul as an immaterial substance, which is, as in other words, its own substance, right? That survives bodily death with individuation. So it is, Aquinas is like basically a dualist, and yet he wants to say he's an Aristotelian. How the hell did we get way off on this like tangent right now? I'm sorry. See, this is why it's good I'm just not going to bother with React content tonight. I want to like spend some time finding stuff to react to and then do a React stream again, maybe tomorrow. But right now it's good to just be yapping philosophy and talking. I could, guys, just so you know, this is part of why I started this channel. I could literally just sit here and talk philosophy for hours. Hell, even if there was like no one or like only one or two people in my chat, I could just sit here and just go on and on. This is why I'm in academic philosophy. You know, this is why I'm trying so hard to get into a PhD program, and I'm excited to start teaching as an MA. And I just want to exist in like university philosophy departments all the time because this is all I ever want to do. There's actually a joke. Well, I don't want to say what my name is, my last name is, but there's a joke where my last name's been turned into a verb at one of the universities where I teach. And the verb is used to mean when it's the art of like starting to talk philosophy with someone in a way that's so interesting and engaging it like distracts them from whatever that we were originally talking about and ends up sending us both down this like 45-minute long tangent. I'm really good at doing that. So kind of natural for the whole streaming gig, right? But anyway, dualism is what I was originally saying was about dualism, which is that we see how dualist assumptions are about what the idea of what something like a soul is, and even the idea of like how often like personality works is just all over media, right? It's almost, there's something almost a little bit sort of uh, uh, kind of naive about it. In fact, I've had a professor before use the phrase naive Cartesian dualism to refer to like it's when somebody just kind of doesn't, they're not really philosophically informed, they don't think much about it, and so they just kind of naturally tend to just assume this dualist intuition about things in a bit of a naive fashion. And that's, I found that is by far the most common way people think about it, right? Is you are a soul, and a soul is like this immaterial thing, and it's separate from your body, and you see it in cartoons, you see it in Freaky Friday, you know, all over the media, body swap kinds of things. These all presuppose dualist assumptions. Now, what I was pointing out, kind of really hammering on in my script, though, sort of interestingly, is that you kind of have this conflict, though, because like the dualism is actually a big feature of modernity. You know, Descartes and Cartesianism really has strongly influenced a lot of that dualist assumed starting point when we're talking about like philosophy of the mind. But it's also that dualism is sort of pushing up against and in conflict with this other trend of modernity, which is materialism, scientism, secularism, these kinds of things. And it's kind of interesting because there's a thinker I like named Gilles Sonne, who in Unity of Philosophical Experience, a work of his, he actually attributes Descartes with kind of really starting the materialistic view of of just your mind is nothing more than your physical brain. You are nothing more than your physical body, and there is no soul or anything like that. There's no immaterial layer to your existence. And and it's interesting because Gilles Sonne actually attributes uh all of that materialism to, or Gilles Sonne puts the blame at Descartes' feet, and Descartes was the big radical dualist, right? So how is he responsible for materialism? Well, because as Gilles Sonne argues quite eloquently, a lot of later on materialists and determinists in the and especially the British empiricist tradition in the Anglosphere, like Locke and Hume and whatnot, a lot of them were essentially just kind of operating within and presupposing Descartes' own dualist standards, and they were just simply, it's like if you assume, it was this issue I talked about with, you get a growing skepticism towards any idea of there existing a soul nowadays, commonly with people, especially the edgy atheist crowd and all that. And it's kind of a similar thing where if you're going to assume the Cartesian dualist view, and you're going to assume that the definition of a soul can only be understood in this very Cartesian dualist manner as something separate from the body entirely, and then you get this interaction problem where how do they interact with each other? It's a kind of a metaphysical nightmare, like Cartesian dualism. But basically, if you're going to assume that starting point, well then, if you end up feeling unconvinced of this additional explanatory factor of having to make this additional appeal to this immaterial and therefore not empirically verifiable substance of thought in order to account for the human person, if you just feel unconvinced of that and you think actually that just seems like explanatorily inefficient, Occam's razor, it seems more to make more sense if we just, go with the simplest explanation possible, which is everything we can observe about the human body, that's the human person. And why add on this extra variable of the soul? Well, that's only really starts to become a problem when you're operating in that assumed dualist framework, right? Because again, under the hylomorphist view, this is incoherent to be talking about like the soul as this separate thing added on to the body. That's ridiculous. Body and soul are together inseparably in one thing. You're just one person, one substance. The idea of talking about any aspect of your existence without either your body or soul merged together is incoherent, right? So this is just like a non-issue for the hylomorphist, but it's only when you're assuming this Cartesian dualism that then you can get skepticism starting to creep in. Just like, well, what if I'm not convinced of this extra layer of separate, additional, immaterial existence that is the soul? Well, then it seems only natural to just remove it from the equation, to just subtract it from the equation and say, now what's left? The physical body. And that's it. So it's kind of interesting, Gilles Sonne's point, that it's not even just that Descartes responsible for starting all the Cartesian dualist trends in modern philosophy, but it's kind of like, it's almost like he's simultaneously responsible for starting a lot of like certain materialistic trends as well. And that also has to do with ways he redefined matter. For anybody who was listening to my script earlier, if you caught, I said there was a difference between like what matter meant or material meant classically, like in the Aristotelian sense. It meant like potential being, right? We went over that. It's the wax, with the wax and the seal. But then But then Descartes' the one who like redefines matter to just mean physical extension. And then substance, whereas substance to Aristotle was material actuality as inhered in formal potential, or substance as we just went over, matter and form together. Substance to Descartes becomes just simply physical extension plus flexibility. Right. So flexibility just means the inherent capacity for stuff to be bent around and like rearranged and like bent into different shapes and such. This is actually Descartes' famous wax example, where Descartes looks at a piece of wax, like a wax figure, and then he says, well, what are the ways in which we might define this wax figure and its being? He said it's kind of natural. A lot of us will be tempted to just define it by its sensible properties. So let's say it's like the color red, and it's this tall and this wide, and it weighs this many grams, and it's in the shape of, it's like carved into the shape of a woman or something. It's this little wax figurine. And you would define it in these ways in which you're sensibly perceiving it, right? And you would define those as like properties of the wax, like its shape, its height, its color. It's these, you would call these all sensible properties of the wax as a part of its being. But then, as Descartes notes, if you just simply hold that wax over a fire, all of its shape and definition and all of these things that you previously would have been tempted to call properties of it, they all melt away. And it just melts into complete, just a puddle of undefined goop. And yet, this is the important part, as Descartes says, and yet the wax remains. And yet the wax remains. So there's still that puddle of now melted wax on the floor is still wax. So what does Descartes take away from that? That means none of those things, those physical properties from earlier, about its shape, its height, its weight, none of these things can actually, they don't really define what the wax is. All that really defines what the wax is the physical extension, like the three dimensions of space. And I guess if you want to add and suppose some fourth temporal dimension, but basically just how much space it's taking up, that's what matter means in extension, combined with its inherent flexibility, its inherent ability to be bent around or melted down into a puddle, or like, the different shapes that hunk of extended stuff can be bent into. That is a radical redefinition of substance away from Aristotle. And if you ask me, a far less, well, I don't want to say far, but if you ask me, I'd say a less sophisticated one as well. And I think Descartes really did a lot of damage to modernity. I might do a video on this. There's a lot, including the egocentric predicament, which is why I've been interested in phenomenology lately. But, so it's because of Descartes, really, you could say, that we get this conflict, this false dichotomy I talked about in the script I read off, of either it's almost like either somebody is this like radical dualist, somebody is like this Cartesian dualist, this radical Cartesian dualist, or they're this radically strict materialist, and there's just like no middle ground and there's no alternative. It's either the human person is comprised of two substances, body and mind/soul, that are wholly separate from each other and somehow causally interacting with each other despite being wholly separate from each other, and despite one being physical and one being non-physical, and somehow, that's called the interaction problem. That's a huge issue with dualism. So either you're this like Cartesian dualist, or if you're not that, then you're this strict materialist, and your mind is just the physical brain and neurons firing in the brain, and that's it. There's nothing else going on, and you as a person are just a physical body, and that's it. And this is such a false dichotomy. That's why I wanted to make the video for the script I read off earlier so badly. It's like a lot of people just don't understand. Like, there are more options than that. You don't have to sit there, and I like the way I put it at the end. It's like the dualist is saying, I am my soul and nothing more. I am just my soul, my mind, and nothing else. And my body is just this separate object from me that I just pilot around. but I am just entirely my soul. Meanwhile, the materialist is saying the opposite. I am my body and nothing more. And there is no such thing as a soul at all. So I guess that's one difference between them, is the dualist says, I'm my soul and nothing more, but they're not denying the existence of the body, obviously. They're just denying that the body is a part of their existence, ultimately. Whereas the materialist is saying the opposite. I am my body and nothing more, but they are going so far as to deny the existence then of the soul. And then, um, well, but and that's why I say, like, why like hylomorphism is it gives you this ability. There are other options between just saying either I'm entirely my soul or I'm entirely my body. There are other options, including a really sophisticated and elegant third position answer of hylomorphism that actually allows you to say quite meaningfully, I am both my body and soul together. I'm both of those things. I'm not just one of them. I'm not just a soul piloting a body as a separate meat puppet from who I am, and I'm not just a body with no soul to speak of. I am both my body and my soul together as one substantially unified being, one substance. Okay, I've been ranting for a little bit, so this is definitely, I think, a bit of a shorter stream tonight, and I didn't even end up doing React. I'm more, to be entirely honest, I more just wanted to get the audio for my script recorded. I guess somebody could pose me the question of, well, if that's all you ever want to do, or if that's all you wanted to do, why not just, like, you can use OBS to make recordings without streaming. Why not just do that? Well, I'm trying to get in the habit of streaming regularly. I think recording scripts or reading out scripts for pre-written YouTube video ideas I had and wrote out earlier in the day can be a good way of getting the audio file down while still getting a stream out there. And sometimes, the last time I did this for my What is Philosophy video, I ended up doing a whole React stream right after. So other times I might do more commentary stuff. Today, I just was kind of thinking a lot about the philosophy of mind. Ever since that amazing Digital Circus React I did, and some of the stuff we talked about, some of this stuff during that stream, and the associated YouTube video with it. If anybody's interested, I encourage you to go check it out. And I thought it might be helpful to really delve deeper into this subject, as I think it's fascinating. This is one of the things I just find endlessly fascinating. And I also find it to be one of those things that, despite as fascinating as it is, sadly, failures of our educational system, widespread philosophical ignorance, a lot of people just don't understand, like, how a lot of these things work, and it leads to these situations where you have, like, people just assuming a soul is like a soul in a Cartesian sense, in a dualist sense, and there's just no other meaning that the term soul could have, and they just can't wrap their mind around anything other than dualism. Or if they're not convinced of that, then the only other option is like some radical materialism. And so, it's kind of a perfect topic to discuss on my channel. But I at least got that script read off, did a little more yapping beyond that. I actually kind of enjoy doing this. These kinds of lower key streams where I'm just reading off a script for later editing and then yapping a bit. But I do think it's pushing up on, it's after 1:30, pushing up on 2 in the morning, so I'm going to end this here. But yeah, keep an eye out for the video I'm going to CapCut up and polish and make into more of a legit YouTube video of I might call it something like Philosophy of the Mind 101. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, but I'm ended here.